Hello, this is Jerry Morton. Welcome to my podcast series, Finding My Way, a memoir by Jerry Morton. This is podcast 82, A Water Tower Adventure. A water tower adventure is an account of a college prank in the spring of 1963 that became more consequential than planned. Podcast 82, A Water Tower Adventure. Another late night studying was underway. That night was just before the Deeks were to have their Saturday night celebration of St. Patrick's Day. The year was 1963, my junior year in college. I remember it well. I had applied to be a dorm counselor during my senior year. If I got it, the college's costs for living in the dorm would be waived, plus I got a phone in my room. Since my board was paid for by the food service for the college, as a result of my being coordinator of the student dining hall workers, I had a grant and aid for half of my tuition, and the other half of the tuition was covered through a student loan. If I got appointed to be a dorm counselor, my parents wouldn't have a bill for the college for the next year. Sometime that March, I would learn if I had been selected to be a dorm counselor. I remember the date of the water tower adventure well. A little background information will help you understand the stress the water tower adventure produced at the time of its occurrence. Back in the early 1960s, the principal social activities on campus revolved around the 6 fraternities. During the middle of my sophomore year, the college relocated all 6 fraternities from their frat houses off campus to 3 large duplexes newly built on the campus grounds. My fraternity, SAEs, shared the duplex with the Deeks. Many of the Deeks' upperclassmen worked in the dining hall when I started as a dishwasher my freshman year. We quickly became friends. I found them to be smart, funny, adventuresome, honest, and kind. Drinking was allowed on campus, but an intoxicated student could be cited and brought before a judicial council. The council would decide on what punishments would be imposed on the violator of the drinking policy. The assigned punishment could be as stern as expulsion from the college. The Deeks had a reputation of being a little on the wild side. I think that reputation was earned. Their parties were reported to be the most rambunctious on campus. When there was a boundary-challenging incident, it was usually the Deeks who did it. So it was not surprising to me to hear that some Deek fraternity brothers from several other universities were staying at the Deek fraternity house in preparation for a major blowout of a St. Patrick's Day party the next night, Saturday night. From the sounds coming from next door, the wild celebrations had already started. I just got tired of studying that night. I decided to quit, go down to the Cup to have a Coke, and then come back and go to bed. The Cup, a coffee shop type place, was just a few blocks from the dorm down by the railroad tracks. Few college guys went there, as townies and day laborers preferred the setting more than most of the college men. As I passed the open living room of our fraternity house, I saw my friend Nate there. "Nate, I'm going to the Cup. You want to go?" "Yeah, that's just what I need right now." With that, we set off on our adventure. As we passed the deep portion of our duplex, we heard music, laughter, and other joyous sounds. We were passing the town's nearby water tower as we progressed towards the Cup when I commented, "You know, the Deeks and most other fraternities has always done something to make them stand out from the others at one time or another. Our fraternity has never done a thing. Just plug along seemed to be our motto. We ought to do something. You're right. Let's do something. Let's be daring just once. Let's do it. Okay, but what will it be? Passing the water tower stimulated us to spontaneously agree that we needed to paint our fraternity letters on the side of the water tower tank. It seemed like every other fraternity had at one time or another painted their Greek letters on it, except ours, over the years we had been in the college. We turned back to the dorm to look for some paint and paintbrushes in the storage closet. As if divine intervention was working in partnership with us, we found a full gallon can of cream-colored paint and 2 large paintbrushes. Once we climbed all the way to the top of the water tower, I would use a screwdriver to open the can of paint. Never having climbed a water tower before, I had little experience to draw upon as we threw ourselves over the 8-foot-high chain-link fence designed to keep folks like us from getting to the ladder and climbing up to the water tower tank. I had slipped my pants belt through the handle of the paint can and rebuckled it to free my hands for getting over the fence and making the long climb up the water tower ladder. Once inside the enclosed area, looking up to the top of the water tower caused me to realize that it would be a strenuous climb getting to the actual water-containing globe at the top. Nate and I were up to it. When we reached the top of the town's water source and maneuvered under the guardrail to get to the tower's surrounding walkway, we were surprised. We were surprised to see that the city's public workers had already painted over most of the old Greek fraternity lettering and other graffiti in black paint. The black painted area was huge. It had to be at least 6 feet high and 10 feet wide, maybe larger. To me, it was clear that the city's paint crew had tired of the painting project and intended to return another day to complete the entire water tank paint job. Once they had laid down this black undercoating, they would repaint the tower white and then paint the town's name in large, bold letters. Anyway, it was clear to Nate and me that the blacked-out space was perfect for painting SAE on the water tank's side. The large letters would be clearly seen all over campus and around town tomorrow morning. We would have done something of note. Setting the can of paint between us, Nate and I got busy. Gosh, the first 2 letters stood out against the black background. The cream-colored paint was just the perfect color. The full moon and cloudless sky seemed to make our Greek letters flow as if they had had a light of their own. As we were working to complete painting the last letter, a commotion seemed to be coming from the back entrance of the Deke House, the entrance facing the water tower. Guys were spilling out the back door shouting and pointing at the water tower. They were screaming. Most of them had cups of beer in their hands. It was clear that many of them were well into their suds. They were an angry mob as they rushed to the chain-link fence protecting the water tower. Some climbed the fence, while others were falling off of it, either inside or outside its boundaries. They were screaming, cursing, shaking their fist at us, and shouting something. Nate and I looked down at the chaos below us, not knowing why they were so hostile. They were clearly angry. Finally, I pieced together some words through all the noise. They were upset that we had painted our fraternity letters on the water tower. Well, that was an understatement, as curses and threats as to what was going to happen to us when we came down, well, they were worrisome. Since we couldn't make out much more than what we had deciphered up to this point, I suggested to Nate that we go down some rungs on the ladder. We wouldn't go all the way down to the ground until we understood why everyone was so upset, and we could explain what we had done. Since I was friends with several of the Deeks, it was decided that I would go down the ladder first, with Nate closely behind me. Once again, I looped my belt through the handle of the paint bucket. We didn't take the time to put the lid back on. Since the paint bucket was a little less than half full, I figured that it wouldn't spill. I stopped descending the ladder about 10 feet off of the ground. People were jumping in the air trying to grab my foot and pull me down into the mob. That would have been a disaster. Some of the guys I knew began asking me if we had purposefully decided to paint SAE on the water tower to ruin their St. Paddy's Day party. No! Why would we do that? Came my surprised reply. More shouts and curses and guys jumping to grab a leg followed my statement, making it hard to hear the follow-up questions. I kept having to pull up one or the other leg as some of the hostiles could really jump. You saw that we had blocked out the space to paint Deke on the water tower. You know, the black painted area spot. That was for us. We did it. We were going to climb up at midnight and paint DKE on the water tower to announce the beginning of our all-day, all-night party. You knew that and tried to finesse us. No, we had no idea this was going on. Sure you did. You saw that black painted area from the ground. You tried to pull one over on us. Now you're gonna pay. Just then, some guy sprang high up into the air, grabbing for my waist. He missed it, but caught the edge of the paint bucket. The paint followed him back down to the ground, covering his head and shoulders with creamy white paint, along with several of those standing near him. They were packed tightly together at the foot of the ladder, allowing several to become baptized in this manner. The paint shower did not calm the maddened mob. It did add a creamy color to several mugs of beer. Out of nowhere, 4 or 5 of my good dining hall Deke friends appeared at the foot of the ladder. They miraculously formed a protective circle around the foot of the ladder and called for me and Nate to come down. As soon as our feet touched the ground, Nate and I pressed our backs together as the crowd lunged for us with their clawed hands stretching to possess us. Our circle of protection pushed them back as several other Deeks I knew and respected joined our friends in shielding us from those who would do us harm. Amidst the shouts and curses, the senior Deke leadership grilled me about the possibility of our intentionally trying to ruin their celebration. As I was explaining how Nate and I were just being spontaneous in our behavior, an occasional drunk would break through the circle of protection. One by one they would come, following a fist in its extended arm, trying to do damage to my face. They would miss by several feet as the inner circle of protectors, and I just leaned out of the way, and the poor fellow followed his feeble weapon to the other side of the crowd. Through this circle of protection explanation period, I was unsure of what was happening to Nate. Our backs were pressed tightly together in the hopes that we formed a 360-degree circle of protection for ourselves. There was no time to discuss any other strategy. We were simply trying to survive. Just as my protectors were agreeing on the truth of our story, the dean of men for the college showed up with his dog on a leash. He was clearly the immediate authority figure of the college. He didn't seem to shout when he spoke to the mob, but everyone heard him. "Get out of the fenced-in area now!" Immediately, the shouting stopped. All of the guys suddenly appeared meek and subdued as they climbed over the fence and walked back to their fraternity houses. I was surprised to realize that a large audience of college students had accumulated on the open side of the fence to witness the chaos. As my turn came to climb over the chain-link barrier, all of my fears about not getting the dorm counselor position for next year became written on my face. Dr. Cavanis, the dean, looked me directly in the eye as I cleared the top of the fence with my feet landing on the neutral ground. Well, I thought, he knows I was in the mob. He'll learn that I was the cause of the whole thing. I guess this is it. I'll not get the position. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from Dr. Cavanis. I was appointed to be next year's dorm counselor in an upperclassman's dorm. Dear listeners, this is the last podcast of Series 2. I would like to thank you for your interest in the stories. At this time, I am taking a sabbatical from the podcast to reflect upon how to proceed in sharing stories with you. I will keep you informed on my progress. Until then, I recommend that you re-listen to the stories. To me, there are multiple levels of understanding within each story. I hope you agree with me on this. Again, thank you for your continued interest.